the end of the day, the mission for Wovio is to provide financial security through community to help people meet their financial dreams. And that's really something we're very proud to work towards and are very ambitious, because that it means that we might play a small role in maybe building a better society.
Absolutely. And I think we're already on our way to that. We're already doing that through so much of even the impact we've seen in the examples you've given us with the World Women's Network and the Nigerian Moms in Ontario. But those are only two of the 250 plus communities that we're serving on our platform. Hello. Welcome to today's episode of the Community Financial Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Justina Kanza. And as you know by now, we bring you all things community economic development, from credit unions, rotating savings circles, community bonds, and pretty much all alternative ways to finance that bridge the gap that's left by financial institutions. And today I'm actually very excited to be seated with my colleague and friend, James Muhato, who's the co-founder at Wovio, but also the head of customer and community success. James, hello. Thanks for being here with us today.
Thank you. My complete pleasure. And thank you. Very eloquently said. Thanks.
Amazing. Okay, so tell the people a little bit about yourself. I usually read out a bio, but I just felt I should let you talk about yourself today.
Oh, man. Thank you for that. So I guess I'd start. So James Muhato, born and raised in Kenya. So Kenyan, I guess would be nationality, but all been very fortunate to be in Canada. I'd say the last since 2009. So it's just about 15, 16 years.
So
it's been a while since that I landing here in Halifax and to attend GPI in my first year. But originally from Kenya, family of 5, had a very fortunate experience to be able to study in Canada for my undergraduate degree, really through community support that allowed that to happen. And that really did instill in me a passion for community. Personally, for me, I have a purpose of being of service because of that. I just find it very rewarding to almost to help people achieve their dreams and their values of success, but equally drive each other forward towards greater prosperity as a human species and race. Yeah,
absolutely.
So I think that would be kind of the things that I'm very passionate about, kind of the history of the family, and really I'm excited for what we're building with Wovio.
Amazing. And you bring a very important aspect right off the bat, which is community. And we're bringing that mentality from back home, because, back home we say we belong to a village. And so wherever we are, we're entitled to give back to a village, right? So I'm glad you brought that here through the work that you're doing with Wovio, but also the different communities that you've built here in the Canadian/Kenyan diaspora. So I want to jump on 2 items, because you mentioned you're Kenyan, and we know we're talking about rotating savings circles, and maybe we describe what that is for people first. What is a rotating savings circle, and what does that look like in Kenya? I know it's called a Chama.
Yes. Also, it's actually called Chama or merry-go-round, and these could be thought of as cooperative systems essentially. And I think there's a picture here of what those cooperative systems might be in different parts of the world. I have a very personal affinity. If there was a perfect word, I would love it to be called Chama worldwide. So we can say the Kenyans have gone global on our process.
Global with it,
But essentially, every Kenyan knows about Chama in the sense that you have a family member who's been part of one. You have an aunt, an uncle. You usually have a cousin or someone at least in your family who's been part of a Chama. And growing up, it was very natural. Chamas evolved to becoming SACCOs. And I even remember, if I was to go back into my history of childhood, I remember when we had a president who may change legislation, and you saw change legislation around public transit, and you saw a lot of matatu vendors who would drive public transport bind together to form these SACCO cooperatives, where essentially they were fundraising and supporting each other to buy vehicles, maintain vehicles, and keep them up to the standard of the government. And they ballooned into these cooperative societies that allowed for entrepreneurial opportunities for the youth as well. So the history for me is really in that I've seen these cooperative structures really lift people out of poverty. And when you combine them with technologies such as M-Pesa and digital currencies, then you're spreading that influence to remote areas, but the use cases and the tangibility of impact are very, very real. And so when I look at Kenya and I think of Kenya, I really see us as being at the forefront of driving, I guess, digital adoption of financial services, but also customizing them to how we as a culture and as a country operate.
So very tailored and localized solutions to problems that are perhaps even global, but also very big on global inclusion. I know that about Kenya and also Rwanda. I'm curious, the president who kind of changed policy, was it Julius Nyerere by any chance?
I think it was Kibaki when he was doing it.
I see.
And it was like, it was very fascinating because around the same time with that and M-Pesa, and I know you speak of the reach these systems have. I remember a story that was being told was M-Pesa and the systems of cooperative finance were helping local women farmers actually finance but also sell their wares and products from the farm. Essentially, how do you extend credit to the most remote in our society? And digital adoption is really what allows you to do that, because it really transcends any borders in any sense.
And our economies back home are very informal, especially when we look at women. A lot of the research for me that I did in university, for example, was about African women entrepreneurs and how they use entrepreneurship as a way to fight poverty, but also many other issues, even domestic violence, a lot of other issues within the community, and they're using entrepreneurship as a tool. But the entrepreneurship that they do is very informal. Like you talk of M-Pesas. In Zambia, we have something we call tuntembas, which is just like kiosks, right? Where like our mothers and aunts are like selling tomatoes, and some of them are farming, but they don't have access to the same formal financial services that, other members of society do have. And so there's a huge need to then digitize, but also adopt the informal financial models that already exist and really innovate them to make them accessible and scalable in a wider reach. And that's what you're essentially doing with Wovio. So tell us a little bit about, and I know we'll have another podcast with the whole founding team on like how Wovio came up, but I want to hear from your perspective and with your history, like seeing this work in Kenya, how did it come to be to bring it to the Canadian space?
Oh man, I love that, but I would love to split that like into two sections.
Yes,
because like on one side, I'd love to speak about it from really like my personal passion and really why that drives that, but also what we're seeing in the space. So with Wovio, and really what brought it about was we're living in a world where technology has given us the ability to use data in so many different ways. There's so much information out there, but equally, how is this information being used to benefit end users with financial services? So yes, I think that there's an informality of these cooperative systems that I believe is fundamental and we must like hold on to, because it's what builds the community and allows us to really understand the pain points and the real motivations of how do we drive local grassroots economic development for the good of their people or the good of the people. And with fintech, it allows for that in between of customized financial solutions for individuals, communities, and societies, while adhering to the financial regulations and compliance systems that have been put in place. And so that's what excites me the most about Wovio, is we're playing in that gray area of making sure we're financially compliant, adhering to all the rules. At the same time, you're meeting with clients who have just these brilliant ideas of how they would use capital, and we're trying to understand how can we mobilize it and make it accessible to them. Like for me, that's very, very exciting.
Very exciting, yes.
And now the second part of when you speak about the informality is realizing that these systems have been in existence for centuries. And I'd love to highlight an organization actually that is currently very active in highlighting this, is the Banker Ladies of Canada. So this is a group of women who have come together, and the term Banker Ladies in our societies have always been these women who manage these informal cooperative financial systems. As you said, a lot of times we see that it's women who end up being marginalized and don't have access to financial services or even capital in our country, like in Kenya, and I can cite that. But honestly, if you jump the border and come to Canada, there's some of that is still around,
Still around, like very much so,
talk about
actually.
the number. I think we're talking about the other day the number of women founders or female founders who actually receive capital or receive
funding
venture
as well.
funding.
It's very the numbers are disheartening. So it's the reality is still the same, even in Canada.
Exactly. So when you look at those situations, the work that the banker ladies are doing is saying for a very long time, a lot of this work went unrecognized and unpaid. What would a system look like where there is a structure for employment and actually economic development from the point of job creation through these systems that have existed and that continue to flourish? And so it's very exciting to be part of those conversations and see how we could potentially have a greater impact in actually lives of people, employment, and driving economic values further, but also, maybe revolutionizing financial services. That's like an eco dream.
Yes, absolutely. And you make a good point when you allude that informal does not necessarily mean ineffective, right? Just because the systems are informal, it doesn't mean they're any less, effective as some of the even Western systems that we've seen in place. It's just a matter of this has been working for so long. How do we make it even more scalable so that we can bring these models to different communities that might benefit from it? And this is exactly what we've done with Wovio, right? Yes. We've seen this work in Zambia's Chilimba, in Kenya's Chama, in Nigeria's Susuajo, different parts of the world. The Mexicans are calling it Tanda. We've seen it work. Now we're bringing it to the Canadian space so they can get the same benefit of how do we do this collaboratively and as a community. And so when you mentioned the example of the banker ladies, I think one of the previous episodes we had Andrea, who's one of the founding members of the banker ladies, and they've actually been able to formalize their organization as a cooperative and even access more funding beyond what's being put together as capital from different funders like government institutions and etc. Now there's two other case studies that I want us to really delve in because I think the audience will find it interesting. The two, I think, probably our biggest communities on the platform, the War Women's Network and the Nigerian moms in Ontario. Yes. So you've been working very closely with them on the ground, and unfortunately we couldn't get them for this episode, but I think you're the next best thing. Tell me about your experience working with them. How did they come together? How did you bring them on the platform? What are the different use cases that you've seen and how they're using their put funds and capital?
I want to touch on one point before we go. So when it comes to formality versus informality, I think Dr. Caroline Hussein, who's part of the banker ladies, she'd push back and say, informal, but to who? She'd always ask that question and like, who's saying it's informal and who's
like who constructs this? Who decides?
What formality is? I didn't want to let that point go. Yes. And I think also the reason why is when it ladders into these two communities that we've been very, very proud to work with and even be affiliated, being the Whole Woman's Network and the Nigerian Moms in Ontario. Both of them found us because of the work we were doing. First with Whole Woman's Network, Juliet and Diana, who were the co-founders, they had been doing this already, but they had been doing it from a very economic development point of view, where the Whole Woman's Network fundamentally exists to drive economic development for their members, whether it be businesses, whether it be emergency loans and grants, or whether it be educational services. They really thrive on being able to provide good education, resources, and support to their members who are often marginalized. And this is for women of all ilks, religion, creed. They're very much so that this is an ecosystem to support women. And we've been very lucky to be able to, one, work with them over the last 2 years. They were very early adopters, very early supporters. And the case study that I would like to highlight is that as part of our structure of using our groups, using the rotating savings system, it builds trust and accountability among their members to such a point that most recently we were able to extend credit to the association to actually invest in one of their businesses. And how it works from an economic development point of view is, as Wovio, we provide the technology to a community. The community is able to distribute it among their members. They take part in these rotating savings and credit groups or savings groups, and that generates alternative data on their repayment that we are able to quantify ability to pay or willingness to pay on creditworthiness based on the positive indicators and signals that we were seeing from Whole Women's Network, we were able to lend the association the money that they needed to buy the rights for one of their members as part of their business. So what they were taking care of, and maybe a bit of a backwards, I started at the end and the beginning, but if you look at most small to medium-sized businesses, you have an issue with consistency in revenues, which is consistency in your orders, or making sure you're maintaining a certain capacity or volume in sales. So the organization as a community came together and said, we will guarantee this threshold of orders, and we will act as the distribution system to make sure that it is sold. What in return it does is it makes sure that the community is your most, I guess, valuable, but also most invested, invested investor.
And they're also your sales agents, because they're on the streets now reselling your products.
Yes, indeed. And they act very actively as sales agents to make sure that your product's actually sold. So their testimonials and their energy towards actually driving your business forward drives their mission forward as an organization. So we're seeing a win-win-win between the business receiving very affordable capital to drive back into their business. As an association, you actually have ownership in the business of one of your members. So you're actually now on the equity ladder. And for the community itself, they build this nurturing relationship where they can see themselves driving each other forward as a collective. And it opens up the opportunity for so many other businesses. Like, since that conversation, it's now springboarded to we have someone who does cooking, we have someone else who is developing actually the most fascinating one is daycare, because it's in such demand in our, I guess, as a society, but they're seeing women coming up with creative ways of, how can we take childcare and almost make it available to our members at an affordable rate? And are there things that we can do to really make it accessible? It's still a work in progress because there is regulation to deal with, but it's a very exciting problem to be facing and deal with.
Solving, that is so incredible. I like, so is the community mobilization that even the Chama and the rotating savings circle facilitates. But I also heard Juliet speak on Sunday at the event. She mentioned something around them mobilizing capital as well to buy a building that they're then renting out to their community, to the women, low cost housing. Can you speak on that and how Wovio played a role in that?
Yeah, that's a project we're very, very excited for. And it's because when we are looking at Wovio and really what we're hearing from a lot of the community partners that we're speaking to, housing is, I think, at the top affordability issues that they have to face. Everyone is really struggling to find affordable housing right now. And so that's one thing that it's an area that we're very passionate about. The other areas include healthcare and also employment and access to credit. So those are the three areas when it comes to working with communities that we seek, how can we be most actively involved? When it comes to housing, the concept of cooperative housing really lends itself into that affordability discussion. And that's really where we hope to play around in the sense, as a community, can you use Wovio to mobilize capital that allows you to access the resources, but also the credit facilities to purchase these property investments? And as a second tier priority, can these be mixed use properties in the sense, and why we're very excited is it can be a daycare at the bottom and then offer affordable housing at the top. So you're really catering to the needs of a community and you can customize this. And really what excites us is that it's community driven. So it's not us coming to say that you need a daycare center, or you need, let's say, a community association, or you need a store that is naturally organic. There are food deserts that exist. But essentially we're saying we want to make capital accessible. And it really lends to that third point of entrepreneurship and access to credit and capital, is how does Wovio play a role in using our alternative data, but also these relationships, and leverage that with our connections in understanding, this is what the data actually says to convert to credit worthiness. And so, we're proud to say that we want to drive economic development at a higher level, make sure it's driven by the community. And as a technology partner and really being a fintech, is how do you ensure that that information is convertible or translatable to mainstream regulations and compliance?
Exactly. So it's a perfect bridge, Wovio, you'd say, between the traditional financial institutions and the community, because we're using some of the regulations from the traditional financial system in Canada to then create solutions that are very tailored and localized to the different communities that we serve, but all the while making sure that whatever solution solution is being created is for the community and by the community. So we're not imposing anything on them. There's a sense of agency that they have in co-creating these solutions with us as a tech partner. But beyond that, that they have ownership of whatever it is that is created, right? Because we know economic development in general really comes from being able to own something and then have, whether it's passive and residual income from it, which these women are seeing even with the cooperative housing that they're building at World Women's Network. They're able to see the residual I guess impact from it. So that's kind of what Wovio plays a role in there.
Yes, we would love to be the perfect collaborative partner for those public-private relationships. Essentially, how do you ensure capital is distributed efficiently, but for the right purpose in the terms of serving the community? And that's it's a place we're very excited to play in, because I think so. On one side, it's hearing about the plans that these associations might have at a grand level, but when you remember that at the end of the day, there's a mother who'd be able to work maybe 2-3 extra hours, earn that income, and afford the daycare and ensure that her child is in a safe place. On top of that, the child or the person, the child being taken care of is among a community that is nurturing and educating them to build them into a more, I guess, not respectable, but into a full adult who's able to contribute to society in a better way. Then you really start seeing like the circular effect of the community we're building. And that I've heard it like from the women themselves, because these are programs that they've piloted, as you'd say, informally, but they work. Does seeing the results of that is really what is exciting.
Yeah, and it again, what you're describing, it's back to the we belong to a village. We're raised by a village, so we see these young kids being raised by a community of women who are, helping each other out, so that the mother can spend an extra hour with the kid or an extra couple of hours working, so they can then afford to properly raise their child, and the child grows out into another James who creates a Wovio and decides, you know what, we're going to send this back to the community. So that whole Ubuntu that I am because you are, but also the social economics of Ujamaa, we're seeing this at play here. I really love that. And I see this example applied in so many ways with the NMIO, the Nigerian moms in Ontario. So tell me about them, because that's a huge community as well. There's about 250 of them, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Oh man, I love my my mamas, my Nigerian moms in Ontario. Yes, they are, I'd say, very energetic, very passionate, very driven, to meet the economic goals and struggles of their community. And they do it in a very, I'd say, positive and endearing way, because I don't believe there's a challenge I could put in front of them, or there's a challenge that could come up that they can't beat. I fundamentally believe that. And it's because of, as you say, it's the concept of Ujamaa and we are. So they are all, as a group of mothers, really jointly invested in the success of the whole community. And the difference I'd say between them and Whole Women's Network is just that they've almost said that anything that is to do with supporting a Nigerian mother in Canada, and doesn't have to be a Nigerian mother, sometimes it can just be a Nigerian in general, they're willing to do it. And that openness is really heartwarming for me, because you see them celebrate that they're going to use a payout to maybe pay off some bills or pay off some tuition. They celebrate being able to use these funds to directly impact their lives. And for us with Wovio, that's something that we really pride, is that while in the informal side of doing this rotating savings or collaborative finance, there's always the delay or the aspect of human error or human situation that could come up. And with technology, with Wovio especially, we can eliminate some of that. So we really pride ourselves on making sure that we have on-time payments, and we are really working towards that at a very high level. And it's really because, from a mother's perspective, and I guess also from anyone, as you're planning the life of your family, that you need certainty of when money is available, because you already have it planned for. And that's what I love the most, is that with Nigerian moms in Ontario, you can see them planning for family and community events months in advance. And knowing that they're trying to reach those goals, they're using our rotating savings system to make credit available to their members in the meantime. Because they're kind of timing that the payout is what I'm waiting for. This is how long we'll be active. But at the end of the day, this is the goal we're trying to meet. And it's very thrilling and exciting, to be honest.
Amazing. Yeah. And also because life happens, as much as they plan ahead to say my payout is coming out on July 30th and I'm going to use that money for that. If something happens between now and then, they also know that they have the cash advance feature, but that they can access, no interest rates whatsoever, right? Yeah, amazing. I did have a follow-up question there. I don't know if we're at liberty to say this. I don't know if that's from the NMIO community or one of our other communities where some of the capital was actually used to purchase a car. Are we at liberty to talk about? We can't even mention the community, but we can just talk about it.
That's from another community that we worked with, and I guess similar to. I guess I'll focus on the use case in this case. In this scenario, if you're employed, transport is really a big factor of it, and especially what we are seeing is our category of job seekers are willing to work outside of the standard bounds of your 9 to 5, to the point that they become gig workers as well. So our demographic has 1 or 2 jobs. Sometimes those may require you to work in person, so you actually have to get there, but also end up being gig workers. So we had a community form, a group where one individual stepped forward and said, I would love to purchase my first car. This is why it's important for me to purchase my first car. I secured my first job. It requires me to show up in person. The hours are outside of what conventional public transit would allow, but equally, this would give me the opportunity for extra income if I was to own a vehicle. So I can have a second job and I can do Uber on the side, and this can really lend itself to my economic growth. So quite simply, they made this vocal to their community admin. The admin was like, okay, we're going to put a group together. This is the amount that we know you're trying to save towards, and we get a number of people inside that meets that threshold. And then you set the amounts of the contributions to meet that goal. And once everyone is acknowledged, let's say you're trying to raise 6,000 for your first car, and now you have 6,000. Yeah. So you get 6,000 for your first car, and you divide that among 5 people, or about in $500 payments. So that would end up being about 12 payments. So you just get 12 people together and say, okay, among the 12 of us, if we can each put $500 in, it is a total 6,000. I'm willing to take part in this group for as long as it takes, which is 12 rotations, to make sure that I can afford this car. So in $500 increments or installments, you're able to make those installment payments, afford the 6,000. And the beauty of a collaborative community system is it's at no interest. And so that's really the pride of it. The car was purchased.
It's beautiful.
The student is, they're working now. They've been able to actually supplement their income. And I think the last picture or the last feedback we got was them literally on the highway, yo, I got the car.
I got my first
it worked
car.
out. So the admin actually shared that with us, and seeing people meet their financial goals through a community. It's awe-inspiring.
And the impact is beyond the financial goal as well. It's what that seeps into other parts of their life. 100%. Now they have a job that they can sustain. Now they're able to take care of themselves because they're not having to, use ridiculous transportation outside hours. So it's really the financial wellness, yes, but also just the health of the community that's being targeted by a system like this. But I also because some would argue, well, why not simply, if you're doing this rotation for 12 months, you're putting aside $500 every month, why not simply put it in your own bank account by yourself until you're ready to make the purchase, right? And then what's the rebuttal that you would give?
I'll answer that in 2 ways.
Yes.
The first way is a personal philosophy of collaboration, but also build bigger, better together.
Build bigger,
essentially,
better together.
And that's because, so in essence, I believe we live in a society where we're at a point where it's possible for you to build a bigger pie rather than cut smaller slices. We have technology that is able, even if you look at ChatGPT, the potential to drive business forward and really drive not only productivity and outcomes further is really amazing. So like you can really be innovative. It's not a matter of let me take here. It's like let me give so we can grow kind of concept in that side. So I really fundamentally believe like the collaborative system of you being able to work with others means that you're able to achieve your goals as a collective and you're building a bigger pie. On the data side of it, you're 40% more likely to hit a goal within a group setting, whether it's going to the gym, whether it's a group vacation. If you have a collective cohort around you, then you automatically feel some social pressure to actually perform and achieve these goals. There's accountability that comes in from society. And then the second side of that would be when you look at your current financial solutions available to you, what outcome are you trying to drive for? That's a fundamental question, because with Wovio, we believe that we want to be the institution that services beyond, that provides beyond banking services or financial services to actually allow for communities to be nurtured and prosper. And so our theory is you can work with us for financial support, for your financial services and products, being able to utilize all the traditional systems, but at the same time, how can we make credit easily accessible not only to you, but the community to drive those economic goals?
Absolutely.
So fundamentally, on one side, let's build a bigger pie. We have the resources and ability to do that. And on the other side of that, we have access to financial services at an affordable rate for our community. So how do we make sure that the financial products, and that's where Wovio prides itself, are accessible and affordable to the communities that we serve? And I believe that that should be like an industry standard. The question should be, are we serving the Canadian public in the best way possible? The best way possible,
absolutely. Yeah, and I would also add in the example of why not just leave your $500 per month in your own bank account is... We talk about accountability in the sense of like it keeps you accountable to put that aside, but there's also accountability in terms of how we are accountable to our society. So whereas that $500 would be seated in your bank account doing pretty much nothing, and you're still guaranteed using Wovio or using a rotating savings circle the same amount of money at the end of the 12-month period, then why not put it in another pool where it's going to help someone else in the meantime, and you're still going to get the, you know, the complete 6K or however much you've saved at the end of that period. I think that's very important as well when we talk of how are we citizens of our community. How are we, you know, contributing to a village that has raised us as well?
100%. And actually, you put that very well in the sense that the money is rotating for utility. It's making sure that someone has use for it. And essentially, how do we use that to build that pie out? And how do we make it accessible? But yeah, you put it very eloquently there.
And as we wrap up, I want to call attention to something that I love that John, who's our CEO, mentions. Is like, why save with a bank that you cannot borrow from, essentially, right? And we see this at play here too, whereas we're more likely to even get funding from our community members to say, hey, I have an emergency, I need $500. We're more likely to get that from each other than we are from the bank sometimes. So why then do we want to save with them and have them benefit from it when we have a community that's willing to pull those funds together? But as we wrap up, any last words for the audience? Anything that comes to mind?
I'd love to touch on that the banking aspect of it. And it's really because, so when you look at, if you look back at the history of how long what we call traditional banking now has existed, then calling it traditional is really skewing the history of banking. And that's because this is something that it's a system that has existed for centuries and millennia. It has evolved to be different things. And what we're faced with now, and why we call it traditional, is because between the frame of our reference, that's what has existed.
Absolutely.
But really what drives a lot of my passion for our rotating systems and our alternative financial services is knowing that there's a wide breadth of this history that has existed in terms of access and financial services and products. If I was to leave maybe with one note, is like collaborate. Actually, that would be it. In my role with community success, I really focus on, as a society or as a community or as a collective of people, what would financial success look like from the sense of your community and your members and yourselves as an organization? And it really speaks to the impact that these organizations in a lot of sense want to have. And with Wovio, we focus on 3 segments. So one, we focus on our community association, who we love working with because they are mandated to really serve their community members. Next in there, we have gig workers. And with gig workers, we really want to develop these relationships of working with them because they live in a world of limbo when it comes to really employment, but also wages. So how do you provide them with a baseline that provides them financial security from their networks? And then the third one, we have our cooperatives and corporations. And in the sense where we're seeing a world where people as a society, we want to be more fulfilled in the work we're trying to do.
Yes.
The cost of life and living is going up. And at the same time, you want to be motivated to work. You want to be motivated to show up every day and put your best foot forward. So we're very interested in working with corporations to see how we can drive the financial goals of their employees to make that process a lot more robust and involving. Because at the end of the day, the mission for Wovio is to provide financial security through community to help people meet their financial dreams. And that's really something we're very proud to work towards and are very ambitious, because that it means that we might play a small role in maybe building a better society.
Absolutely. And I think we're already on our way to that. We're already doing that through so much of even the impact we've seen in the examples you've given us with the World Women's Network and the Nigerian Moms in Ontario. But those are only 2 of the 250 plus communities that we're serving on our platform. Amazing. Well, James, thank you. Thank you for being here with me today. And to our guests, thank you for joining us once again. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Make sure you like and subscribe and comment what stood out to you. And if you want to learn more actually about the case studies that we shared, make sure to email us at info@wovio.com, I believe, or just message us on our social media, and we'll be more than happy to connect you with the amazing communities like the World Women's Network and the Nigerian Moms in Ontario that have made such great impact using the rotating savings circle model and specifically using the Wovio platform. I wish you all a great day, afternoon, evening, wherever you're watching from, and see you in the next episode.